The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 2431. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2431, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to higher education, the second engrossment.
There are amendments at the desk. If there is no objection, we will let the author explain the bill before we act on amendments. I recognize the member from Benton, Representative Wolgamott.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I am proud to present to you House File 2431, the Higher Education Finance and Policy Bill. This bill is the result of robust negotiations between myself and my co-chair, Representative Marian Rarick, and I'm very proud of the fact that we worked together, even with a zero target, to fix the state grant program, hold harmless the University of Minnesota, the Min State Colleges and Universities, and the North Star Promise account. We were able to work on a bipartisan basis to secure a $1.5 million investment in the partnership between the University of Minnesota Medical School and CentraCare for the St. Cloud Medical School. And I'd like to give credit to the chief author of that bill, Representative Bernie Perryman, for her strong bipartisan partnership in getting this over the finish line. We also are adding cybersecurity as an applied doctorate degree at Minnesota State. Madam Speaker, those are just a few of the highlights of this bill, but again, I will note that this bill is a true compromise, and there are programs that were cut in this bill that are hard for myself and for the members of my caucus and the students that we're looking out for to stomach. But again, the spirit of compromise, we worked together, we came up with a good bill that does good things, and I look forward to the discussion today. We'll look forward to answering any questions, and I'm proud to turn it over to my esteemed co-chair, Co-Chair Rarick. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Wright, Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. We had a really difficult task ahead of us. So it's about a $4 billion bill, and we had zero target, zero in this biennium, zero in the tails. And that seems like a simple thing to do, except for the fact that we had $239 million hole, huge hole, in the state grant program. And that huge hole, $239 million, was the equivalent of one entire year's worth of state grants going out to students. So we had zero new money, and we had to fill and fix a huge hole, one entire year's worth of state grants. And it's not a bill that came easily. We negotiated, and it actually had to take a pause, and we negotiate some more, and it was a very difficult bill. But at the end, it was something that we both could agree to. And of course, if I'd written the bill, it would have been different, and if Chair Wolgamott had written the bill, it would have been quite different. But before we go on to amendments, I just want to acknowledge a few people that were really pivotal, and we've got some great staff. So our nonpartisan Ken Savory, Nathan Hopkins, our GOP staff, James, Lori, and Ben, and the DFL staff, Andrew, Sean, and Evelyn, and every single one of them played a huge role in giving advice and helping us to craft the bill. The last thing I would say before we go to amendments is the Higher Ed Committee did something that I don't think has ever been done in the Higher Ed Committee. We actually did budget work, even more than had been done in the previous biennium, because that was quite a walk. But we went through every single line, every single appropriation, and even I see some folks from the University of Minnesota up in the gallery, even the detail of every single line item under that. So sometimes there are 14 or 15 appropriations in one line item. We went deep. We asked hard questions. We had, I believe, 8 of us on the committee were chairs, and we just asked hard questions. We had every single nonprofit that got a single dollar in the base come in front of our committee, and we looked at 3 years worth of audits, 3 years worth of 990s. We looked at their salaries. We asked them hard questions. We also had them present a sheet that said how much government money they get and from which sources of government. So was it state, was it local, was it federal, what was it? And so it was a look that we've never done, and I would recommend every single chair in this room that if you have a budget look like that, you're going to find out things that you never knew was in was in that budget. So this budget is a reflection of that work. It was bipartisan work. I'm going to say with 8 chairs on the committee, we had really, really hard questions. So you'll see that this budget is a direct result of that hard work. So we didn't just do this haphazardly. We actually really looked and really asked hard questions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend House File Number 2431. The second engrossment. The amendment is coded A9.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz, who will explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I get started on the A9 amendment, I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Representative Schultz has requested a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A9 amendment speaks specifically to the North Star Promise Act, something that's pretty new to Minnesotans. But at the same time, what we're realizing is that we have a lot of holes to fill within this area of higher education, and to ensure that we are providing for the needs of Minnesotans and Minnesota students in particular. And as the way that the North Star Promise program came about in the last few years, this program has allowed for people who are here illegally to gain benefits to go to college for free in Minnesota. That's right, members and Minnesotans. People came to our country and to our state and broke our laws to get here. And then our state and our tax dollars have gone to support those same people and to send them to college for free. And what my amendment seeks to do today is to close the eligibility requirement loophole that allows for this to happen. And it is my goal, members, that with this amendment that we are ensuring that it's Minnesota students, those here legally, that benefit from this program. And quite simply that, members, that is why I'm asking for your support on this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson J.
Thank you. You know, I see that this position has evolved quite a bit from the really confusing language that was in House File 10 when it came through the Higher Education Committee. You know, that time that we didn't even get to discuss it or ask any questions because it was like really smoothly slicked and escorted through the committee process with little to no engagement or opportunities for discussion. So nevertheless, I appreciate that it is always a better place and a better practice in public policy making to refer to an existing definition rather than, you know, try to reinvent the wheel without the experience to do so. So hats off to taking some Democrats' advice and improving that part of the bill here and the proposal. So sadly, but unsurprisingly, the root of this argument hasn't changed at all. I personally still find it to be devoid of humanity, wrought with hate, and it still really smells of prejudice. That's, of course, just, you know, my opinion. But nevertheless, I'm going to suggest a no vote because targeting people who meet the criteria that's laid out in 135A.043 is not only an ineffective way to do what's being proposed, but it's also quite misleading to the public, if I'm being honest. The particular definition that's cited here explicitly says that eligibility always requires that anyone without what's referred to as lawful immigration status must provide, 1, documentation that the student has complied with Selective Service Registration requirements, and 2, pursue a federal process, if one exists, for the student to obtain lawful immigration status and to present the higher education institution with the documentation from the federal immigration authorities confirming that the student has filed an application to obtain lawful immigration status. So this amendment targets students who are doing what's expected of them, according to both state and federal law. And they're waiting in our nation's judiciary line that our lawmakers chose to set up for them. And if you're bothered by these long wait times, welcome to the club. Because let us not forget why we are here, because just last fall, congressional Republicans bowed down to Trump's demands to block the very immigration reforms that would have sped up this process. And this Congress now, I think we all know, is far too dysfunctional to really do anything about it. So now there's a longer wait time for people who are doing the thing we told them to do, and an even longer wait time for those of us who know that there's a big need for systemic change that lies ahead of us. So while these eager college students wait to do what we told them, and while they abide by exactly what the law says to do, why would we discourage their eagerness to pursue a higher education? Usually, we consider that an honorable pursuit. Does this pursuit not empower them to gain more skills and more American credentials while they wait in the line that we made for them? Does this not also empower them to contribute to society in the ways that much of this country frankly demands of them, and in the ways that they want to contribute? I mean, we know that immigrants or not, people who pursue a higher education contribute significantly to society. They commit far less crime than those without experiences in higher education. And they usually have higher incomes, which means they pay more taxes. They usually have more kids, which I hear is all the rave right now. Those kids usually also go to college and eventually pay taxes too. And they add to our society in their own unique and beautiful ways. Higher education is a significant protective factor for so many things that I can assure you cost more than this will save us, a mere $70,000 a year. The reality is that many of us in this chamber have families who were strangers in this land at one point in time. And personally, that really reminds me of my religious upbringing that taught me loud and clear that welcoming the stranger is honorable, that to be kind to our neighbors is dignified, and to help and care for those who need it is respectable. And so, like several folks in this chamber, I too went to a Christian college at one point in time, and I taught in the church at one point in time. And like many people, I watched countless people leave the church when organized religion began to teach the opposite of what we were taught in the Bible, in Sunday school, and throughout our time in church. And eventually, it became what seemed like a really widespread and dishonest manipulation of religion that was being used to justify hate. And it became, for me personally, too painful to endure, because the gross and intentional misrepresentation of the greatest commandment of all, to love each other, was becoming and has become but a distant memory. I was being asked to teach my students to completely overlook the repetitive teachings of compassion for the stranger and for the poor from Proverbs, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Luke, Leviticus, Matthew, 1 Timothy, Psalms, Micah, Zechariah, 1 John, James, Ephesians, Colossians, and probably more that I can't even recall right now as I was preparing my notes today. But I know that I personally left the church because I could no longer teach kids that it was okay to hate anyone else in the name of religion. And I refuse to lie to children.
Point of order, Madam
There is
Speaker.
no lack.
State your point of order.
What matter of business are we on? Because we're talking about churches and leaving the church, and I thought it was the higher ed bill.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. We are on the Amendment A9. Please keep your comments to the amendment at hand. Representative Hansen.
Thank you. As I said, this conversation reminds me of my personal experience there, and that's what I'm sharing here today with you. Because I left knowing that there is no lack of clarity or misunderstanding in what this taught me about welcoming the stranger, caring for those in need, forgiving trespasses, and loving one another. And to me, I found it to be cruel to teach otherwise. And I also found it unacceptable to wear Christianity, my Christianity, like a badge of honor, while others were quite literally using it as a weapon of war. So, while Trump tries his hand at fascism by attempting to control what universities can and can't teach, who they can and can't admit, while plain-clothed ICE agents ignore the Constitution and kidnap students who are here legally, while 42 million people suffocate under $1 trillion of student loan debt, and while an amendment based on really xenophobic principles for just a mere $70,000 is before us, let's just call a spade here. This amendment seeks to smear and rage farm a collective hate toward people who are statistically far more peaceful than Americans. This is not only contrary to data and a fear-based boogeyman tactic, it also deflects from the truth that this administration and their supporters would love nothing more to hide from in the public discourse. Because the actual goal here is to erode our higher education system in as many ways as possible, because an informed America and an educated America is a free America. And a free America can't be as easily lied to, cheated, or deceived by the government in the ways that we're seeing today. So I ask you for a no vote today, members, and remember what we've been taught our whole lives, that love is how we should treat each other, with kindness, with respect, because those things are honorable, and it's what's been modeled for us for hundreds of years in this country. So let us not forget our roots, and let us be kind to those who are simply seeking to advance their lives, strive for the American dream that we have promoted for hundreds of years. Please vote no, members.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Feist.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to oppose this amendment, which would exclude Minnesotan students from the North Star Promise based on their lack of immigration status alone. In many cases, this lack of lawful status is based on the actions of their parents and not these students. Through my comments, I would like to make 4 points regarding how we should consider immigration-related provisions such as this in the larger context of economic policy and history. My first point is that it is okay to hate our immigration laws because they suck. This may be one point that has bipartisan agreement. We should agree that our current immigration laws are disconnected from the modern realities of our country and the world. But we must be clear-eyed about the fact that the tensions between our broken immigration structures and our economic and workforce needs create perverse incentives for people to live and work in the United States outside the law. We should acknowledge that we are punishing people who made a logical decision to respond to those incentives while capitalizing on their presence economically and, through amendments like this one, politically. The second point I would like to make is that we are repeating a historical cycle. The United States has repeatedly benefited from immigrant labor and then judged and punished the very immigrants who provided it with restrictionist immigration laws. This goes all the way back to our founding fathers. Benjamin Franklin wrote of German immigrants that they are, quote, generally of the most ignorant, stupid sort of their own nation. The Irish potato famine led Irish immigrants to come to America to take menial, essential jobs as laborers and house cleaners. The nativist backlash was swift and harsh. Chinese laborers built the Transcontinental Railroad and then were exiled and excluded through laws like the Chinese Exclusion Acts and the national origin quotas. There is a trend here. My next point is that there is a better way to do this. We have previously leveraged our immigration laws to meet national and regional needs, and we could do it again. While the Trump administration has made it clear that it opposes all immigration from every country, both legal or illegal, previously we worked in the past to pass bipartisan immigration laws that were thoughtful, business-minded, and bold. The last two ambitious, proactive immigration laws were passed by Republican presidents, George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan. Through these laws and others, we leveraged immigration to send skilled foreign physicians to medically underserved areas and VA hospitals. We leveraged immigration to drive targeted investments designed to create jobs for U.S. workers. We directed immigration fees to directly train U.S. workers and educators in emerging fields. The lack of bipartisan interest in Congress in taking proactive measures to enhance and update our immigration system is the problem, not the immigrants themselves, who we rely on heavily to fill workforce needs, fuel our economy, and provide a tax base. Lastly, the data does not bear out the argument that immigrants, and specifically undocumented immigrants, are a net drain on our state and nation. Sean O'Neill with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce wrote on March 7th in the Star Tribune, quote, "Immigrants also play a critical role in filling high-demand positions in healthcare, technology, and engineering, fields that are essential to Minnesota's future competitiveness." 19% of construction workers are undocumented. Their contribution is even more pronounced in the residential construction, where industry leaders have warned of an acute labor shortage. A February Star Tribune article found that there are 17,000 job openings right now for care professionals in Minnesota, and that disrupting the immigrant workforce would be catastrophic. Through my own work as an immigration attorney, I can personally attest to the lengths that long-term care facilities in rural areas go through to secure immigrant care professionals for openings that they simply cannot fill with U.S. workers. Our seniors will suffer if we discourage immigration in Minnesota. A 2021 Minnesota Chamber of Commerce report found that, quote, "Minnesota needs immigrants. Immigrants link Minnesota to the world economy and make valuable and meaningful contributions to our state as employees, entrepreneurs, consumers, and taxpayers." Regarding undocumented immigrants, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce found, quote, "In reality, this group doesn't represent a significant cost or burden on the taxpayer's bottom line," unquote. The most recent data shows that immigrants in Minnesota paid $6.2 billion in taxes, a little bit more than that $70,000 that this amendment would save us. They exercise $17 billion in spending power, and they represent nearly 30,000 entrepreneurs in Minnesota, creating jobs for Minnesotans. I would like to conclude with a quote by Supreme Court Justice William J. Brennan in the case Plyler v. Doe, which confronted a similar proposed law excluding children from education based on immigration status. He wrote, "The state must do more than justify its classification with a concise expression of an intent to discriminate." And he concluded, "The situation raises the specter of a permanent cast of undocumented resident aliens, encouraged by some to remain here as a cheap source of labor, but nevertheless denied the benefits that our society makes available to citizens and lawful residents. The existence of such an underclass presents most difficult problems for a nation that prides itself on adherence to principles of equality under the law." Please vote no.
Further discussion to the amendment? I recognize Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the A9, again, we're asking for your green vote today. And just as a quick response to some of my folks across the aisle who I consider friends here in the room, let's remember that this amendment is all about the eligibility requirements for the North Star Promise program that provides free college to people in Minnesota. And this amendment specifically would not allow people who came here illegally and broke the law to receive free college tuition here in Minnesota. That's what this bill does. So that we can support more, this amendment does, so we can support more Minnesota students. If we can just take a moment and realize that the data that relates to illegal immigration over the last few years hasn't given us a very accurate picture of the number of people who meet this criteria here in Minnesota. For frame of reference, the most recent information we have is actually from 2019, when there was approximately 82,000 people who did not have lawful status in Minnesota. Then Joe Biden was elected president. And at that time, there were over 10 million encounters by illegal immigrants on our southwest border. And I'm not saying that 10 million people came to Minnesota. Obviously, they did not. And at the same time, you could kind of extrapolate it out, do a little bit of research, and determine, based upon the people who were undocumented before, you could determine what percentage would be likely to come to Minnesota. And so I did a little bit of that digging and found that, simply put, the population that would be impacted by the North Star Promise here in Minnesota, that would have crossed just in the last 4 or 5 years, could have equated to between 3,000 and 9,400 people who are here illegally that could get free college in Minnesota. And that cost to state taxpayers could range from $1.7 million to $5.6 million if we use the data from the first year that this has been in law. So this is an opportunity for us to right the ship, realizing all of this area of higher education is facing deficits and shortfalls in the budgets. And are we really going to prioritize those who came here illegally, or are we going to support Minnesota kids? That's the option today. Vote green for Minnesota kids. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Hussein.
Okay, go ahead.
Hussein, no.
Hussein votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Coulter moves to amend House File Number 2431, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A10.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Coulter, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this budget, like every other budget, represents a series of choices. And I say that because I think it's important for us to remember that we are indeed choosing to put forward the budget that we have before us. As I said in committee, though, my fear is that some of the choices that we are making are penny wise and pound foolish. To put it another way, with a phrase that I like to use often, it's pay me now or pay me later. And this bill is heavy on pay me later. The down the road costs of not supporting our students are harder to see, but they don't just go away. Pay me later is always more expensive and always has worse results. I'm bringing forward this amendment because I believe we can make different choices, better choices, choices that reflect not only our values, but the expectations that Minnesotans rightly have about where their taxpayer dollars go in higher education. This bill makes cuts to large animal, veterinarian, and ag education loan forgiveness. My amendment restores those. This bill eliminates the partnership between the University of Minnesota and the Mayo Family Medicine and Residency Program that has residents working in rural communities across our state even today. My amendment funds it. This bill defunds the Student Parent Support Initiative that can make all the difference for the 1 in 4 students who are parents, many of whom are single and most of whom are women. My amendment fully funds it. This bill cuts off the paramedic scholarship that I authored that supported hundreds of eager, soon-to-be paramedics, 2/3 of whom are under the age of 30 and are disproportionately women. My amendment keeps it going. Most disappointingly, I think, this bill leaves our students coming out of the foster care system, the kids who we all are responsible for, high and dry. My amendment would ensure that nearly half of the students who get our Fostering Independence grants won't be waitlisted. Now, you're probably wondering how we're able to do all of this while still keeping the bill in balance. There's no trick to it. It's just a simple trick. We can make these things happen simply by removing for-profit colleges from the state grant program. For all the talk of fraud that we have heard, we don't hear names like Globe College, Minnesota School of Business. And while we can't reclaim those lost dollars, we sure as heck can keep them out of the hands of the next Argosy or ITT Tech. Now, to be clear, not every for-profit college is the kind of skeezy, scammy place that the ones that I just listed were. But even if they're not, why should these places that have abysmal graduation rates, even as they leave students with an average of $3,300 more in debt, profit directly off of our state grant program? This bill is an opportunity to begin an important conversation on the state grant program, and I welcome it, really. It's one we need to have. My amendment moves that conversation forward and encourages us to take actions that will be good for the state grant, and more importantly, good for students that I think we can all agree can and should succeed. Thank you.
Discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In this state, we have children that belong to all of us, and there are foster kids. There are foster youth. And in Minnesota, we have said, if you are in foster care and you want to pursue a higher education, we will help you. We will provide the leg up that you are missing because of foster care. We will fill in the holes that you have not had an opportunity to have because there wasn't someone who started a 529 for you. We have said that foster youth belong to all of us, Republicans and Democrats, urban, 7-county metro, and greater Minnesota. Minnesota's foster youth are our children, and they are our responsibility. The FIG program and the investment in the FIG program has given an opportunity for Minnesota's fosters to go on to college, to achieve the goals they didn't even know they could do. And the current bill holds the funding stable. The problem is, we have done such a good job in Minnesota of telling our fosters that they matter, telling our fosters we see you, and telling our fosters we will support you, that they are applying at numbers our fiscal staff never anticipated. And they are applying because they believed us. Just like your children believed you when you said you created a college account for them. When they got to college, you opened up that checkbook. And now our fosters are ready to go to college. And we need to open up ours. Madam Speaker, I did forget to ask for a roll call on this amendment. Just wanted to do that.
Representative Hicks has requested roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hicks.
Our FIG students, our foster students, our foster kids are looking at us and saying, hold up. Y'all said if I graduated from high school and if I got good grades, that you'd help me go. And we're saying, yes, we did. But actually, we said for-profit colleges should get money first. So we're going to wait list 43% of you. That's what we're saying. Representative Coulter's amendment fixes that. It says that for-profit colleges are not as important as our children, as the children that we all took responsibility for when they became fosters. The children that we owe this to, and the children we made promises to. And those promises were not Democrat or Republican. They were bipartisan promises. And this amendment is a bipartisan solution to fulfill the promises we made to our children. And I hope that every single person in this chamber thinks about disappointing the children we promised.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson J.
Thank you again. Sorry to bother you all with more of my voice, but I just couldn't help myself because I am a product of student parent support programs. I come from a long line of poverty. Nearly every woman in my family history had a baby before she could buy a beer. I was, late having a kid at 17 compared to the rest of my family. So these programs were important because I'd also never seen college as an opportunity. So if you haven't heard my story, I was a teen mom turned first-generation college graduate, and I now have my master's degree, and I stand before you here today. Like I said last time I talked about this part of my life, that it's not something that a lot of single moms or teen moms will ever get the opportunity to do. I really can't imagine how I would have gotten through college without the support of the Student Parent Support Program at St. Kate's. This was an all-women's college. I felt supported. It was the first time in my life I had been exposed to a genuine support system of sisterhood. I didn't have a chance to go join a sorority when I was 18. Those were things that weren't available to me. I had tried college and failed in my early 20s and took a third swing at it in my mid-20s. And this program at St. Kate's really drew me in because they helped me understand not just school financing, but how that affected my ability to provide for my kids. They offered us, this is like the most important part, they offered us a free lunch on Saturdays in between our Saturday classes. And it was at those lunches that I met who is now my absolute best friend, the sister I never, ever had as a kid. I have two brothers, little brothers at that. And we would go to these lunches together where we and other moms would bond and commiserate over the struggles of trying to raise kids and our grades all at the same time. We were tackling a very rigorous social work program with thousands of hours of internship, with full-time jobs, and trying to sustain our families. We never, my best friend and I at least, never would have had the spare money to actually go out to lunch together and have this bond form because every penny of what we had at that time went into our children and our education. I paid for my entire final semester out of pocket, which at a private university is not easy. And her and I both came from backgrounds that statistically told us that we were supposed to be down and out, not rising and thriving. And yet our sisterhood over the last decade has led us both to where we are today. She's a therapist with her own private practice, and I'm here with you. And we often reflect on what we would have done if we didn't have this program. This is a program that gave us a meal every Saturday, which was probably the only meal we ate that day most of the time. This was a program that helped us get Christmas gifts the year that both of we both had appliances go out right before Christmas, and we cried. We did not know how we were going to buy gifts for our kids. This program helped us with that. This program helped us get discounts on car seats because all of our littles were growing so fast we couldn't afford the car seats as they needed them. And we got to do clothes swaps with other women. And if you've had girlfriends your whole life, you know that's like a normal thing. That was something we didn't have because we'd spent so long in survival mode that having that opportunity to share our maternity clothes with other pregnant people coming behind us meant a lot. There's just no way that we would have found each other or completed this program if we didn't have the student-parent supports there. So I'm living proof that cutting and eliminating this program is a terrible idea because I know you all want 10, 15 more of me in this body, right? And student parent supports look different at every campus. And at St. Kate's, this is where we learn financial skills, got that meal I was talking about, and we let somebody else take care of us for a half-an-hour lunch where we could take a breath. We both graduated, and the connections made on those Saturday afternoons are still alive today. It's been a decade, and we still call each other for support. I talk to my best friend every single day, and we still look back on those times. So before you agree to cutting this program, remember, single moms do among the best in college. We add so much to our communities because we really know how to figure literally anything out. And even when we're at the lowest points in our lives, we still know how to take care of each other. And so please don't eliminate this program. There's programs like the Jeremiah program that houses moms with their littles together while they complete the programs. Women like me who never, ever would have had those opportunities. So to all of the people in here who know what it's like to be limited, to be told you can't, to be held back, and all of you who did it anyway, this is a program that does that for thousands of people across Minnesota, and mostly women and single moms. So leave us a little bit of money. Say yes to Coulter's amendment, Representative Coulter's amendment, because that at least will help us continue to help the moms who need it and keep making Minnesota a great place. Please vote yes.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the Coulter Amendment, but before I make my remarks, I'd like to move for a call of the House.
Do I see 10 hands? I do see 10 hands. The House is under call. The clerk will take the roll.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Is this a point of order? I recognize Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the roll call be suspended and that the Sergeant at Arms be instructed to bring in the absent member.
Members, we will need to vote on that by voice because we are in the process of call of the House. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. That motion carries. And the The clerk will close the roll and the Sergeant at Arms will bring in the absent member. Members, we are on discussion to the A10 amendment. Representative Liebling, you still have the floor. Go ahead, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So as I said before, I rise to support the A10 amendment, Representative Coulter's amendment. So this is a reasonably good bill overall, but there is something in here that I think is really dumb. And that is, I don't think there's anybody in this chamber who probably thinks that we educate enough physicians in this state, that we have enough physicians in particular in rural parts of the state. And yet what this bill does is cut the funding for the Mayo Family Medicine Residency Program that helps train physicians for rural parts of the state. So this is not a huge program, but it's been going on since 1978. It started out in Casson, Minnesota, which is represented by Representative Quam. And it's a small community. It's growing, but it's a pretty small community. And it also, since 2023, has been taken over the Mankato part of the training as well. So this program trains 42 physicians, and these are folks that are training to be rural family medicine physicians, something we very much need as a state. We're not supplying a huge amount of the funding. I believe it's only about 12% of the funding for this program. But this bill just targets that funding and cuts that funding. I'm not going to talk for a long time this evening, but I want you to know where some of the graduates from this program have gone. Because there's some of your communities. They've gone to Battle Lake, Waseca, Fairmont, Hastings, Mankato, and other places. So this is really foolish. Hate to use that trite phrase, penny wise and pound foolish, but this really is. Why are we taking away funding? It's not that much money, but taking away funding that's going to train physicians for all of our communities, especially the rural communities. Family medicine, that's what we need in this state. And so members, I hope that you will support the A10 amendment. To get the funding back for this program, we should be expanding residencies in Minnesota, not cutting their funding. Thank you, members.
Members, as a reminder, we are still under call. I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hewitt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I stand to support the Coulter Amendment. It said a magic word, which 98% of us in this chamber agreed to last year: paramedics. EMS is still in jeopardy in our state. Every one of your communities needs a paramedic. JAMA, the Journal of Emergency Medicine, last year released a study that said if we can deliver ALS care to a scene of a traumatic accident, 80% of those people live. We need more paramedics in this state, and this program that we funded last year is doing just that. I believe the author has the numbers, but it's over 100 paramedics now are going to graduate this next year from the program you funded in this chamber. So please, members, please support the amendment. It's a great amendment, and it will help your communities.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, unless there's any other speakers, but okay. So I just wanted to correct the record on a few things. So the FIG program, the Fostering Independence Grant Program, last biennium, they were about $5 million short, and we worked really, really hard in the committee. The Republicans were on board with that to backfill that and take care of them. They're at the same base that they were before. When we were on break, some new numbers came out, so we were not aware of this, that projected that there are going to be a tremendous growth in the program. That happened after we got back, after we basically just presented our bill. So I just want you to know that this wasn't like we decided that we didn't like the FIG program, that we didn't care about fosters. None of that's true. When we move on to the Senate, that will be a priority. Obviously, the Senate has a different target than we do. So I would appreciate I just wanted to clarify that. The other thing I would say is that by cutting for-profit entities, you're talking about cosmetology schools by and large. And the amount of money that you're saving from cutting out for-profit entities, mostly, again, cosmetology schools, is about $9 million, but you are spending 17, so the numbers don't really add up for me. The other thing I would say is that, as much as we would like to do the paramedic scholarship, we didn't have, again, we had a zero target and a $230 million hole in the state grant program, and so the state grant program, backfilling it, was our priority. And through the lever changes, so the policy changes, and the cuts that we agreed to, these are bipartisan agreements across the aisle, those cuts were agreed to, we closed that gap to $62 million. So it's not completely gone, but we made a lot of progress. But we did not have room to add new programs. And the paramedic program, as important as it probably is, was not in the base, and so we didn't consider that. I would also say that the large animal veterinarian loan forgiveness program got a small cut, again, agreed to across the aisle, and the ag educator loan forgiveness program got a very small cut, $10,000 cut. Very, very, very small. Collectively, it's $110,000. That's what's being restored in those two programs, and I would point out that the governor cut it completely. The governor slashed those two programs, as does the Senate, I believe. So this is a small change. Again, these are things that we had agreed to. These are cuts that both sides of the aisle had agreed to, and this goes far afield from the agreement that we had. So the last thing I would say is the student parent support initiative that we heard quite a bit about. Most of what was talked about is not the program at all. I don't know what program we're talking about, but this program is money that goes to the institutions, so Minn State and the University of Minnesota primarily, to have them decide what kind of programs that they want to do. It was something that was just started 2 years ago and has barely gotten off the ground. So some of the things that we looked at cutting were programs that had barely gotten started. This is one of those. Again, a cut that was agreed upon on both sides of the aisle. I would also say regarding Mayo, so if you look at just last year's gross revenue for Mayo, which is a nonprofit, so we did look at all of those things, their gross profit was over 18, almost $19 billion. Again, almost $19 billion. Their net profit was about $1.8 billion. And we had to weigh, do we continue to fund this or do we start a new medical school up in the St. Cloud area doing the exact same thing that Mayo had been doing. And so that's what we decided, that we would move in a new direction and support the medical school in St. Cloud to also train doctors for the rural parts of Minnesota. So just setting the record straight as to what this amendment does, what it doesn't do, what we'll be doing as we move forward. I would ask everyone to please vote no on this amendment because for those reasons, and also it does go far afield of what we had bipartisanly agreed upon in the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to sort of correct the record on a couple of things that were just mentioned here. I obviously don't go to the cosmetologist very often, if ever, but I do happen to know that there are perfectly fine cosmetology programs at, for example, Century College and I believe Minnesota State Southeast as well. I also wanted to clarify on the numbers that I think the number that Chair Rarick mentioned was a single year spend on for-profit colleges. For-profit colleges receive about 17.307 approximately million per biennium. So these cover the cost of both years of the biennium. So I just wanted to clarify that. I do just want to, first of all, sincerely first thank Representative Hicks for bailing me out on the roll call request publicly. As the youngest with 3 older sisters, I'm quite accustomed to getting bailed out by the women in my life, so I appreciate that. And I do just want to thank her and Representative Hansen and Representative Liebling for their thoughtful comments. Really, I just want to sort of end where I started, and that is to say that this amendment represents a choice. I believe it's a better one than is currently offered in this bill. This amendment asks us if we are going to prioritize supporting students who are single moms and aspiring doctors in Casson, in my wife's hometown of Waseca, and Battle Lake, folks who want to help farmers and want to become paramedics. Are we going to keep the promises we made to our foster kids? Or are we going to choose over all of that, sending even more money to for-profit colleges? When I go back home, I know how I'm going to answer that. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment.
Madam Speaker. Point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Madam Speaker, when we're under call, are members required to vote?
When we are under call, members are required to vote.
Thank you.
Members, please vote. clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Hussein.
Hussein, aye.
Hussein votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 67 nays, the motion does not pass and the amendment is not adopted.
Madam
Representative
Speaker,
Niska.
Madam Speaker, I move the call of the House be lifted.
Representative Niska moves that the call of the House be lifted. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2431.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and really, members, thank you again for the discussion on that. So I came into this budget really with sort of two overarching goals: to protect the North Star Promise for Minnesotans and take as big a swing as we could toward addressing the shortfall in the state grant program. And this bill does accomplish both of those things. I, too, would like to take a bigger swing at the state grant program, Chair Eric, but I will be voting yes for this bill. That does not change my belief that we can do better. And the amendment that we just voted on laid out some options that we have for ways that we can do better. And I want to return to this concept because I think higher education is really just one of those areas that is so clearly pay me now or pay me later. And these are costs, when we don't pay them, that not only do they not go away, but they are costs that we all pay. And in particular, I want to mention efforts to ease the crushing burden of student debt that so many Minnesotans face. And when we see what is happening in Washington with actions being taken by the Trump administration to unexpectedly restart student loan payments, and even today, the U.S. House Republican budget plan, it was announced, will cancel the U.S. Department of Education's ability to cancel student debt for borrowers who were defrauded by the colleges they went to. That is one of the ways that they are going to extract the dollars to cut taxes for the very richest Americans. We know that student debt is continuing to hold back so many folks from contributing to our state and our economy in so many ways. So protecting the North Star Promise is a big win. Don't get me wrong. But there are, as I mentioned, some really serious shortfalls. And my hope is that when we get into conference committee, that we can explore the option I laid out about for-profit colleges in our state grant program, and really any others that we can think of. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Goodhue, Representative Allen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I am speaking in support or strong support of the actual or the full bill itself. It's especially around preserving the large animal loan forgiveness program and the agriculture education forgiveness program. Two initiatives critical to the future for greater Minnesota. Frankly, it was alarming and a little disappointing to see the governor's proposed budget eliminating these programs out of the system altogether. At a time when we need large animal vets and agriculture educators, it's clear disregard for the needs of greater Minnesota communities and the backbone industries in which drives Minnesota's economy to this day. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet to a lot of us. These were real people, real careers that drive rural Minnesota on a regular basis. I'm thankful to the House for stepping up to where the governor fell short. And we fought for these loan forgiveness programs. It kept them alive because we understand agriculture is not just part of our past, it's central to our future. This bill provides that we prioritize the real needs of Minnesotans so we can protect the industries and communities that too often get overlooked here in our state. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Wright, Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So again, I would just say that we have done everything that we possibly can do to protect students and their families. We are facing, with zero targets, a $239 million hole in the state grant program. We had to make hard choices. We tried to go to a different direction. As I said, the reason that we agreed to eliminate the funding to Mayo is because, in part, there are very, very large ability to cover that and then start a new program up in St. Cloud. So those are some of the choices. I know Chair Wolgamott, that was an incredibly important program for him up in St. Cloud, in the St. Cloud area, to train doctors up there. So we will still be training doctors, just in a different location. I'm sure that Mayo will continue to train doctors. It is one of the top places that doctors try to go in the entire United States. So I'd ask you for your support on this. This bill, is it perfect? Is it the bill that I would have drafted? It's not the bill I would draft or the bill that Chair Wolgamott would draft. It is a compromise bill, and we will go into the Senate with your thoughts and your feelings and your desires, and we will go into the conference committee with that. With that, I ask for your green vote.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Wolgamott.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Speaker and members, for the robust discussion today on our higher education finance and policy bill. I want to be clear. This is not a perfect bill, but it is a good bill. It's a compromise bill. And I'm so proud of the work that Co-Chair Rarick and I and our teams did, even with a zero target, to fix the state grant program, to hold harmless the University of Minnesota, to hold harmless MnState, to hold harmless the North Star Promise Act. These actions that we have taken, that we are going to take in this bill, are going to make a tremendous difference, not just for Minnesota's students today, but for Minnesota's workforce tomorrow. And I'm proud of that. I want to thank our incredible higher education team, whose hard work throughout this entire session and in the negotiations that led to this compromise has been absolutely invaluable. On our DFL side, our committee administrator, Sean Herring, our researcher, Evelyn Weiner, and our committee legislative assistant, Drew Jones. And on the Republican side, committee administrator, Lori Cousino, the committee legislative assistant, James Cook. And then I apologize, Madam Speaker, if Representative Rarick would yield to a question.
Representative Rarick will yield. Representative Wolgamott.
Representative Rarick, you have an incredible researcher. His name is slipping me. I just want to make sure he gets recognized.
Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chair Wolgamott. Ben Freese.
Thank you, thank you, Representative Rarick. I want to thank Ben Freese, as well as our nonpartisan staff, Ken Savory and Nathan Hopkins. Again, members, when we are investing in higher education, we're investing in students, we're investing in the American dream to use your talents and your passions to better yourself and your career, and as a result, better the state of Minnesota. That's what we do with this compromise bill. I ask for your green vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Hussein. Hussein.
Hussein, aye.
Hussein votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 120 ayes and 14 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title is agreed to.